Welcome, welcome, welcome to you at home and welcome to our studio audience. This is the Evidence series, and in this programme we're looking at, no, I'm not going to tell you just yet, we'll keep you in suspense, but what I will tell you is that we have great discussion and brilliant music as always from Ken Burton and his band. Ken. Thank you, Ken.
Very nice. It didn't sound like Mozart to me.
And this is Dwight Nelson, our other host.
Jillian, tonight, to introduce the theme, a quiz for the audience and you.
Okay.
What do these people and one nation have in common? Nelson Mandela, Pope John Paul II, Gordon Wilson, Desmond Tutu, and the nation of Australia for one day every year.
Okay, throwing it out to the floor.
Anybody have an idea?
Come on.
Just call it out. We would probably take all night if we wait for this audience. How about forgiveness?
Forgiveness,
Yep.
that's the answer.
The one universal need that we struggle with in every country and culture. Tonight's subject, a huge one, but we've got an authority, and he'll be here in just a few moments.
Forgiveness, it's
Yeah.
a very difficult thing to do, very hard to do. You've only got to ask people who think they've been wronged their definition of forgiveness.
Forgiveness? What's so good about letting someone off the hook? It's an easy word to say, but doing it? That's a whole different matter. They say that if we forgive someone, we reduce our stress and anger, and by holding a grudge, we just make our own lives miserable. But how do you forgive when the pain is all you can see? How can you get peace of mind when you don't want to forgive? Not forgiving is definitely easier. Well, at least in the short term. Does that make forgiveness easier in the long term? Is forgiveness something I can actually do, or is it just another way of making me feel guilty?
That's quite a reality piece. I mean, is forgiveness easy or is it difficult? Enoch Adu, college student, you have struggled with this business of forgiveness. How did you end up dealing with it?
The struggle occurred when basically I was in a close-knit kind of friendship thing, and one of the friends just stepped out the boundaries of the relationship, and basically I had to make a conscious decision whether to forgive, because I felt to myself that being so close to me, this was a thing that you ought not have done, and for you to have to do it, basically I just didn't consider that person a good friend. If they could do that to me, then I thought they're not really my friend, and so I didn't want to be
a sense of betrayal. They betrayed your confidence, let you down.
Yeah, they let me down, and also I didn't want to speak to them. I didn't want to be around them, because every time for me to be around them meant that I had to basically deal with the issue.
Did they come to you for forgiveness?
They did, but at the time I wasn't hearing it, because I wasn't ready to forgive. I needed time alone to just think things through and consider the relationship on a bigger scale.
And how many of us tonight are in that same predicament with relationships that matter so deeply to us? We want to get to the answer, Enoch, to the dilemma you've just raised. We need to get to some music. Jillian, tie this into forgiveness, please.
We're going to have a musical item now from Frederick Miller from Croatia. You're a singer-songwriter and you've written this song, Magdalena.
Yes.
Tell us what that's about.
Magdalena is a true story about forgiveness, and Magdalena is actually the main character of the story.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Frederick Miller.
Thank you. Sunset slowly settles in, starry lights abound. No one in the city is around. Someone's harp is whispering with a weeping sound, while the shadows dance on the ground. shadows of the candlelight on the bedroom door. There's a woman lying on the floor. She is selling herself tonight, as she's done before, selling her body, nothing more. The smell of bodies in the air, moving slowly everywhere, covering her tears of despair. There is no one in this place who's not spitting in her face, even those who pay her each embrace, looking at the sea through the blur. She yearns that God would speak to her. Magdalena, do you know my name? I saw your grief and tears, my heart felt the same. Magdalena, I'm so glad you came. I'll take away your sins, I'll remove your shame. Morning is a misery anytime when she's awake. To be awake is more than she can take. A crowd of people by the seas calling someone's name. She can see them through her window frame. And then she saw the killer looking at her eyes. She's gotta meet him, this she realized. Sobbing all along the way, she came there in dismay. Then she heard the words she recognized. Magdalena, do you know my name? I saw your grief and tears, my heart felt the same. Magdalena, I'm so glad you came. I'll take away your sins, I'll remove your shame. Like a broken trampled rose, she had suffered many blows, but she was happy anyway. Recalling what she heard that day. Magdalena, do you know my name? I saw your grief and tears, my heart felt the same. Magdalena, I'm so glad you came. I'll take away your sins, I'll remove your shame. Magdalena, do you know my name? I saw your grief and tears, my heart that felt the same. Magdalena, I'm so glad you came. I'll take away your sins, I'll remove your shame. I'll take away your sins, I'll remove your shame. Magdalena, Magdalena, I'll remove your shame.
Now, forgiveness is usually associated with pain, but sometimes, just sometimes, good can come out of pain. This next person that we're going to hear from, Stephen Broadbent, is a sculptor, and he shares with us his journey through powerful healing of forgiveness.
The sculpture's called Reconciliation, and I made it about 12 years ago. And it was just a small model that I made at the time when I was just making small pieces to exhibit. But it was inspired really by the fact that I fell out with a very close friend of mine, and very dear friend, and we had a big bust-up, and I was upset, and I came to the studio, and in a day I made two models. One model was called About Turn, which was a figure that was moving and turning and walking in the opposite direction. And the second figure was reconciliation, which was a sort of universal sort of figure of this image, really, of this sort of embrace, these two people coming together into one solid base. And really I wanted to put flesh on what I was feeling, make something that would express what I was feeling at that time, or what it would take for me to get right with that person again. Following on from that, I mean, Liverpool has gone through a process of recognising some of its history, and the last act of the local council here was of the century. The last act of the council was a unanimous vote of apology for the part that Liverpool played in the slave trade. This project now is an attempt to really put some legs on that expression, really, and that actually travelling now to Richmond, being cast in bronze, and one of them is going to be put into the slave trail within Richmond, Virginia. One is going to go into the grounds of a centre for reconciliation in Cotonou, Benin.
Stephen Broadbent there. Well, there's no denying that it's extremely difficult to forgive, but I can say that I've wrestled with it myself. It's something we've been doing for centuries, since time began. Lots of theories on it, but what do we mean when we say forgive?
Forgiveness is not keeping the hard feelings in your heart, just to enjoy every day, appreciate every minute of your life.
It is to accept how people are.
Prvo neko mora da zgreši da bi mu oprostio. Nikad ne zaboravljam to, ali znači trudim se da pređem preko toga I da to ostane po strani.
I find forgiveness hard. I think it's about perspective taking usually. In the times when I've been most successful at forgiving people, it's because I've been able to put myself in their shoes and try and see their perspective on stuff. So I think if you can do that, then it's easier, but it's a hard one.
To me, it's the beginning of something good for something bad you have done. You forgive yourself, you forget, and you carry on.
If that person means a lot to you, you need to just forgive and forget. If you want to be close.
It's the same. Depends on how much you love somebody, I guess.
It means very much. You have to be able to forgive, and you have to, because if you don't forgive, then I don't know, you can't live.
It's just the time will be the best healer for things like these bad things. Time, just time, and be patient.
Forget, let go.
Yeah.
Just to let go.
Just get over it.
So we've established that achieving forgiveness is extremely difficult, but there is a tremendous sense of release that comes with forgiving. What's the worst thing that anybody's ever done to you? Have you been able to forgive them? Well, Jo Tufnell's father was killed by an IRA bomber in Brighton. This is her story of her journey to forgiveness.
My father was a Tory MP, Conservative MP, and he was attending the party political conference in Brighton in '84 in October. And on the second or third day there was a bomb that went off early in the morning, and he was killed and my stepmother was injured, and there were 5 other people killed and many, many injured. I heard the news, I was in London and heard the news first thing in the morning there'd been a bomb, and after about 8 hours of waiting, heard that he was one of the bodies they'd found. Very soon after the bomb went off, I wanted to bring something positive out of the tragedy, out of the trauma, and somehow help bring peace. I felt like it was a choice I had. I could either stay a victim and become bitter and hardened, or go on a journey in which I would somehow bring something positive out of the terrible, terrible trauma. And in '85 we had a name, someone, Patrick McGee, who was arrested and charged and went to prison. And while he was in prison, I did an article for a newspaper and said, one day I would like to meet Patrick and hear his story. Many years went by and I forgot about that. And then about 3-4 years ago, he came out of prison as part of the Good Friday Peace Agreement. And around that time, I relived the whole day as if it was happening for the first time and began to deal with some of the trauma which I actually hadn't dealt with. That took me to Northern Ireland, and I met many people. Forgiveness, for me, is now a journey rather than a moment that I've experienced and then finished with. And forgiveness is a choice that I can make every day, whether to forgive or whether to not. With Patrick, what he's taught me, it's actually about, can I open my heart enough to hear his story, to see his humanity, to carry on being open to him, or am I going to close down? And some days I want to close down because it hurts too much, and that's fine. Patrick has come a long way from the moment he set up the bomb. He now feels that there was a terrible cost, a legacy of taking up violence, and part of that was he lost some of his humanity. He had to see my dad as a legitimate target in order to plant that bomb. He wasn't seeing real human beings. For me, that strategy involved totally causing my life to be in a million pieces. So, that still hurts that he feels it was a good strategy, it was a good bomb. For me, it was not a good bomb. But I can understand why he came to that place. And I think I feel responsible as an English person for being part of the community, the society that led to the people, Republicans, having no voice. I think there are deep causes of why people become terrorists, why people take up violence. So I want to understand that. But in terms of whether he deserves my forgiveness, I think he deserves a chance to get his humanity back. So my aim is to see his humanity and everyone else's humanity. But that's a constant struggle. And some days I succeed and some days I don't. And also Patrick, I can sometimes get annoyed with him, and then things can get very difficult inside me because there's a voice which says, well, how can you trust him? They killed your father. And then I go way down. So I have to constantly watch myself and always see that I am letting go of the part of me that wants to blame and understand him. But it's a lot of inner work that I'm doing. I do meet many people who are very surprised, and some people are angry about it and threatened, and some people are very surprised and say, well, I'm sure I couldn't do that. But actually, there's no way I can't do it, because I find it's actually transforming the pain and the grief that I felt that makes me do this. If I didn't do this, I'd be left with the difficult feelings. But it's the difficult feelings I have that I transform into this energy and passion to be part of a world where violence isn't seen as an acceptable solution. So I use my trauma, I use all the pain to change, to transform. So it's connected to my trauma, it comes out of my suffering. But I found a way of making it actually work for me. And part of that is being with Pat. And I actually regard it as a gift now, that he is so open to working with me, however difficult it is. I do see it as a gift.
Nobody said forgiveness was going to be simple. I tell you, you think of the story of Jo, with her dad's killer released. And she has to live with this now. As she put it, it's a journey. And we are delighted to have with us today someone who knows about the forgiveness journey, freelance journalist, 8-book author Michael Henderson. Good to have you on The Evidence. Your latest book, Forgiveness, Breaking the Chain of Hate, 70 stories. Because Jo's story is not unique, is it?
No. Unfortunately, we don't always get these stories in the media. Perhaps we're increasingly getting them. But that's why I write my books, to give people encouragement that this is a way they could go, and other people are doing it.
Let's cut to the chase. Definition, forgiveness.
Surrendering the right to get even. Deciding that your past experience, however horrible, is not going to determine your future. And a journey, as Jo said. Journey of a lifetime.
Yeah. Now you take these stories, 70 of them that you've documented. Is there a common thread, Michael, that ties them all together?
I suppose the one common thread is that each person there has been willing to start with themselves, rather than pointing the finger of blame or apportion blame. Either to start with themselves to put things right, or start with themselves to forgive.
We're not dealing with huge bombing and murder issues every time, are we?
No, sometimes it's very personal things that happen in your own community.
I was just talking with Enoch a moment ago, and certainly in comparison, it seems rather a smaller issue, yet the same common thread.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can we decide to forgive? Is it a conscious decision?
I think it's a conscious decision, but some people can decide right at the beginning when they need to. Some people, as Joe says, are working their way through it, and it may even last a lifetime.
And how should we feel if we're, sorry to cut you dry, how should we feel if we're not able to forgive, if we still have that resentment and we want revenge?
Well, I don't think that we should ever judge other people, or I don't prescribe forgiveness to people. I give that as an option, but it's an entirely voluntary thing. I try to introduce people to other people who are forgiven, perhaps in circumstances as bad as theirs, which may encourage them to do so. Some people will decide to because of the motivation. They want to build a new Europe, build a new world, end a dispute in the office, deal with a problem with the neighbor. But not everybody's going to do it, and it's entirely a free will thing to do.
Okay, now we're talking about it. So let's focus in. I bump into you, Michael Henderson, on the street. I say, oh, you're the man who wrote the book on forgiveness. I'm struggling to forgive someone. Would you tell me how to do it? What would you tell me?
Well, I learned early on in life, and I learned this at a Center for Reconciliation in a place called Co in Switzerland, that God has a plan for the world, and if you want to find your part in that plan and take time in quiet, you may find it.
What if I don't believe in God, though?
It doesn't matter, because God, you may call it the inner voice, call it what you like, but there's something implanted in our hearts that can give us direction. So I would hope that perhaps a person would experiment with that idea of taking time in quiet. I would try and introduce that person to other people who've been through just as bad experiences. I might even give them something to read on the subject.
Probably your book you'd recommend, would you? Well, that would be a delightful recommendation. But look, say the person that has wronged me is not caring that he has wronged me. Can I still forgive even though he or she is not repentant?
If you want reconciliation, you need both repentance and forgiveness. But you can forgive without someone else repenting. You may not go on to reconciliation. You may not want to make that person your best friend. For instance, the Pope forgave the man who tried to assassinate him, but the man quite rightly stayed in prison. In other words, there's justice too. We mustn't forego justice. This is the trouble with the word sometimes. People think it's a soft approach, or someone's getting away with murder, when it's not that.
Because in the end, the issue is something inside of me.
That's right,
Yeah.
yes.
And I can resolve that issue deep within inside of me.
I think it's important to have the company you keep. I tell stories in my book about British ex-prisoners of war of the Japanese, some who forgive, some who don't. I think those who forgive actually get together with other people who've had the same terrible experiences, but encourage them in that forgiving. And so I think it's the company you keep that helps.
Michael Henderson, thank you for calling us to break the chain of hate and holding up the high ideal of forgiveness. How about a warm thank you to Michael Henderson. God bless you.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Well, this next musical item says it all. Forgive Me. It's going to be performed by Victor Acquah. It's a tremendous thing when you can achieve forgiveness, isn't it, Victor?
Yeah, I mean, even personally, my own experience, with friends and my relationship with God, I've done many things to hurt people. And when I'm forgiven, it gives me a sense of release and joy. And so when I can extend that to others, it's just a great thing.
Victor Acquah.
Go to church once a week, sometimes two. Lord, I wanna be what you want me to be, yet often sin represents all I do. Forgive me once again, even know why your mercy never dies, but I'm glad. Oh, I'm glad. Your spirit always seems to grab me just bore I go over the edge. What I can't understand is why you're even here when I've trashed my oath and my pledge. Forgive me, Lord, once again. Cleanse me. Oh, forgive me once again. Cleanse me. I don't even know why your mercy never dies, but I'm glad. Oh Lord, I'm glad. I'm glad. Oh yes, I'm glad. I'm glad. Thank you, Lord. When I mess up, you're still there. You're still there to cleanse me, to wash me, to cover me. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor Aqua. What a moving plea for forgiveness. I read a very disturbing book written by Simon Wiesenthal. Maybe you've read the book, The Sunflower. In that book, he tells a story of how, as a young Jewish lad in a Polish Nazi concentration camp, he's on a work detail one morning when an expressionless nurse comes to him, taps him on the back, and secretly removes him from the work detail. Follow me. No words. She leads him into that Polish hospital, up the stairs, down some long, dark hallways, opens a door, and motions for him to enter. Young Simon enters. The room is dark. He finally makes out a hospital bed and a body lying beneath a draped sheet, except for the head. And the head is entirely bandaged, except for 4 holes. A hole for the mouth, a hole for the nose, 2 for the ears. And where the eyes should be, yellow-gray pus oozing through the bandage. Young Wiesenthal stands there motionless. Against his better judgment, he's here when the form beneath the sheet begins to speak. I want to quote from The Sunflower and Simon writing. From the bed, I heard a weak, broken voice exclaim, "Please come nearer. I can't speak loudly." Now I could see in the semi-darkness the figure in the bed more clearly. White, bloodless hands on the counterpane, head completely bandaged. Hesitatingly, I sat down on the edge of the bed. The sick man, perceiving this, said softly, "Please come a little nearer. To talk is exhausting." I obeyed. His almost bloodless hand groped for mine as he tried to raise himself slightly in the bed. I sat on the bed spellbound. I couldn't take my eyes off the stricken man, and the gray-yellow stains on the bandages seemed to me to be moving, taking new shapes before my eyes. "I have not much longer to live," whispered the sick man in a barely audible voice. "I know the end is near." What follows, and you'll have to read the book for yourself, is a surreal, almost unbelievable, but tortured confession of this dying Nazi SS soldier to a young stranger, a Jew. The nurse had obviously, in some merciful effort to give this man a last dying request, had pulled Simon into that room. The man wants to confess. Turns out that before he was mortally injured, wounded on the Russian front, under the command, he made it clear, under the command of higher orders, he and his colleagues had gathered 150 to 200 Jews inside a vacant farmhouse, gassed it, grenaded it, torched it, and then stood there with a machine gun should anyone try to flee. The haunting memory of that atrocity he cannot release. Now he dies, but he must confess. Wiesenthal quotes him. "I know what I have told you is terrible." This is an errant Christian Nazi soldier confessing now. "I know what I have told you is terrible. In the long nights while I have been waiting for death time and time again, I have longed to talk about it to a Jew and beg forgiveness from him. Only I didn't know whether there were any Jews left. I know that what I am asking is almost too much for you, but without your answer, I cannot die in peace. Will you forgive me?" The plea of the bandaged head. Wiesenthal writes, a battle raging inside of him. What a contrast between the glorious sunshine outside and the shadow of this bestial age here in the death chamber. I stood up and I looked in his direction at his folded hands. At last I made up my mind, and without a word, I left the room. What would you have done? 25 years later, Simon Wiesenthal, still haunted by that confession and his decision not to forgive, who obviously miraculously survived the Holocaust, though he lost 86 family members and loved ones to the Holocaust. He writes the book Sunflower, and he ends the narrative with these words: "You who have just read this sad and tragic episode in my life can mentally change places with me and ask yourself the crucial question, what would I have done?" What would you have done? What would I have done? For the next few moments, I want to cogitate with you on this almost inexplicable human reality called forgiveness. I mean, where does forgiveness come from? We've heard the stories in our session today. Moving stories, but where did it come from? This gift of forgiveness. Is it something that is innate in our human psyche? Do we have a capacity for it? Or has it come from externally? And if so, how? If so, where? I want to right here at the outset raise some serious questions about certain aspects of modern science. I've done so before. I want to assure you again, I am thoroughly in gratitude to the advances of human science. I have some very dear friends who are scientists at the university where I work. But I'm raising questions about science's premise, its naturalistic premise, that all of our emotions, all of our passions, all of our desires, all of our love is somehow through the quarks and carbon and chemicals of life one day just became us. I really struggle because where in that great cosmic soup does forgiveness boil to the surface? How did we get forgiveness? Where's it come from? I want to put some faces on the screen. Take a look at these faces. You may not know these names. Every one of these is a forgiver. See the face of the woman in the corner, Abigail, whose daughter was brutally murdered? How could she forgive and then visit and become friends with the man who murdered her daughter? You see a face up there? Gordon Wilson. You know Gordon Wilson, don't you? Whose daughter was killed by an IRA blast in Belfast. You remember that story. How did he come to the place where he could forgive those murderers of the terrible deed? And what about the Pope, John Paul II? How did he find forgiveness for Muhammad Ali Agha for shooting him? Where did this forgiveness come from? Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, forgiveness does not make sense. It's not logical. It's not natural. Is it natural for us? Well, I don't think it's natural. Somehow something wells up within us. And I like how Michael Henderson put it a moment ago. I don't know what you want to call it, the inner voice. Call it what you want. But something comes inside of you and says, you have got to forgive. You can't hold on to that bitterness. That anger will destroy you, sir. Please. Where does it come from? You know, I suppose our natural human longing, justice. You believe in justice? Give me justice. Give me vengeance. Give me retribution. I want to settle the score. That would seem to be the most natural of our human quest. And so you enter forgiveness into our life stories. It seems something even higher, doesn't it? Higher than justice itself. Where in the face of justice, you're still willing to forgive. I mean, I'm still thinking about Joe. You saw Joe up here? Joe, who says, my father's murderer, released by the government, and I now live on a journey to forgive. Where does it come from? Dog eat dog, that's what Charles Darwin said. Rex Tyrannosaurus eat Rex Tyrannosaurus. Where does forgiveness come in Darwin's world and paradigm? That's a fair question. Very fair question. And by the way, isn't this amazing? We not only receive forgiveness, where did we get this notion that we could actually ask for forgiveness? I want to read a statement to you that is a request, an official government request for forgiveness after the collapse of the Berlin Wall, but before the unification of Germany, all right? The newly formed East German government, in its first official act, I'm going to put the words on the screen for you. This is what they voted. We, the first freely elected parliament of the GDR, on behalf of the citizens of this land, admit responsibility for the humiliation, expulsion, and murder of Jewish men, women, and children. We feel sorrow and shame and acknowledge this burden on German history. We ask all the Jews of the world to forgive us. End quote. I say, wow. Because if you believe that forgiveness simply oozed its way to the primordial surface once upon a time, would it result in asking for forgiveness by a government? We're thinking forgiveness, ladies and gentlemen. I want to read to you, exploring as you and I are where the source of forgiveness might be. I want to read to you a quotation from someone you should know very, very well if you live in this region. In fact, my guest house, right across from the guest house where I'm staying, is a beautiful little meadow with his name on it. The road in front of the guest house, a lovely British English road, it has his name on it. This afternoon, I went to the oldest building in Binfield, which happens to be the All Saints Church, and he sang as a choir boy in that church. Do you know of whom I speak? I speak of Alexander Pope. Thank you, Alexander Pope. He spoke this line, wrote it. I'm going to put it on the screen. For the next few moments, I want to take that line apart with you. Do you remember this line? Of course you do. To err, that means to blow it, all right? To err is human. To forgive, divine. Alexander Pope, your own native son, right here on the outskirts of London. Alexander Pope. Let's take a closer look at that phrase. The other day, you and I were sharing together a book out of the opening salvo of that ancient scriptures. In the book of Genesis, one line. Let me put the line back up on the screen. We quoted from this line. I want to go back to it. You remember this? How does that line go? In the book of Genesis, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you again that single line comes heavy laden with some powerful implications, because that line is suggesting that if the human race has come from the hands of an external designer and creator, according to this account of origins, we, men and women, have somehow imprinted in us the very character, the image of that creator. An image, a character, a source of origin that is in radical contrast to Darwin's paradigm. Now, here's my point. My point is this. I believe that when you and I exercise the act of forgiveness, we're doing something that actually transcends our humanity. And for a moment, I realize how limited it is even when we forgive. But for a moment, it's as if we are tapping into the very character, the very attributes of the God mentioned in Holy Scripture. For some reason, it seems that if we can accept this notion, and we'll put it up here just for our contemplation, if that notion were true, then forgiveness isn't something that mutates up from below. Forgiveness is actually something that emanates from above. Wouldn't that make sense? Yeah. Now, if that were the case, then maybe Alexander Pope is right. Your son. To err, how's it go? Say it with me. To err is human. To forgive divine. A great man from your village made that confession. Maybe he's right. And if it's true that forgiveness is from God, and if by forgiving we somehow are drawn into this attribute of the divine, then what is it that the divine forgives? I want you to for a moment think of everything that's gone wrong on this planet in the last 24 hours. What's taken place? There's been crime. There have been robberies. There have been murders. There have been rapes. There is a war still going on. All of that evil. There's no way you and I can possibly get our minds around that extent of evil. I mean, it's like that old song, you've got your troubles, I've got mine. How am I supposed to figure out the woes of an entire civilization? And yet, if that little ancient line is true, there must be somebody in this universe who carries all of that upon his mind, upon his heart. What does the divine forgive? All of it? And the moment you introduce forgiveness with the concept of God, we need to quickly note that the same ancient book suggests that this God who has created man and woman also loves the entire human family, the entire civilization. The moment you start speaking of love and a love for the entire children of this earth, suddenly forgiveness comes into even sharper focus. Hey, look, why did the SS officer request a Jew? Why didn't he say, do you have an Anglican nearby? Why didn't he say, bring me an Episcopalian, bring me a Muslim? Why did he ask a Jew? For a Jew? Because Simon Wiesenthal was a representative of the Jewish people. They were his own flesh and blood. They were his very identity. When someone wrongs a child on this planet, could it be there is someone else in the universe that says, hey, wait a minute. Do you understand? This child is mine. You, in touching the child, you have touched me. I want to tell you something. If somebody comes to me and says, you know, Dwight, I just slapped the neighbor's little girl. I said, well, you shouldn't do that. Why would you slap the neighbor's little girl? If that same someone comes to me and says, Dwight, I need to ask forgiveness because I just slapped your little girl. Whoa! You have just changed the playing field. Why? Because you've touched somebody that is part of me. So when you're talking about God and all the evil on this planet, any child you touch, you're touching the creator of that child. Yeah. So forgiveness, if we're not going to be totally comfortable with the naturalistic explanation that it just, well, you know what forgiveness is? It's just a few of those hormones that get mixed up together and voila, you do it. If you are not willing to satisfy yourself with that definition, I want to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, there is only one other alternative. There is not a third world view. There's only one other paradigm. That ancient book, that speaks of a creator, a master designer who has imprinted his very character into the human psyche, that book needs to be rather carefully examined. Because if God is the source of forgiveness, and He's willing to forgive anything and everything, whoa, I want to revisit. I'd like to revisit that whole theme. When I forgive, could it be that in a small way, a very small way, I might be reflecting the very attribute of God Himself? I like how Michael Henderson put it a moment ago. In fact, he was quoting Lewis Smedes. I had a television program in the United States a few months ago where I had Lewis Smedes sitting in that seat. He's a very well-known in my country ethicist. And I asked him, how would you define forgiveness? And this is his definition. Forgiveness is surrendering the right to get even. That's a pretty heavy thought. Surrendering the right, letting go, being willing to let go of what has just been dripping with acid and anger and bitterness in your own heart. Letting it go. Could it be we've been imprinted with somebody else's attributes and character that could actually bring us to be willing to let go of that injustice? You know something, what's so fascinating about us as human beings is that we are intimately woven together. Have you noticed that? I mean, what happens to my body affects my mind. What happens to my mind affects my body. We're just one holistic, what's the word I want? Unit. Yeah, that's what we are. So if I have chosen to let anger and bitterness fester like putrid rot in my brain, is it possible that that dripping acid in my floating mind extends to the very ends of every tissue I have? Could it be today that there are people who have died prematurely because they have not learned that they have the right to forgive? They have the right to let it go. Forgiveness. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, we're not just dealing with some little namby-pamby optional choice for the human race. We're dealing with the very core essence of survival. I said that a moment ago when Jillian and I were sitting up here together. Forgiveness, obviously, is not easy. I mean, you look what Joe went through. And you know, Enoch had to wrestle with the very same issue. Will I forgive this person who betrayed me in my inner circle? This isn't an IRA bombing, but it's just as significant to Enoch. Nobody said forgiveness is easy. In fact, you know what? It is impossible for forgiveness to be easy. Let me put the words. If forgiveness were easy, by the way, this French philosopher would be absolutely right. Let me put his words up on the screen here. Herbert Marcuse once said, one cannot and should not go around, I'm thankful for this counsel, one cannot and should not go around happily killing and torturing. And then when the moment has come, simply ask and receive forgiveness. You can't trivialize forgiveness, ladies and gentlemen. If you owe somebody forgiveness, I'm not making light of it, it's not going to be easy. But the question here as we move to a wrap is, how do I know what to do? Thank you, Michael Henderson, for reminding us in your book that there are organizations that deal with reconciliation. But as wonderful as those organizations are, they're not going to be much help to me in my day-to-day struggle for survival, and probably not much help to you either. I need some help right now. Okay? Move to the wrap. But take this thought with you. Because some of you are saying, you know, Dwight, I am not an evil man. I've never set off an IRA bomb. I've murdered nobody. I've raped no one. I really haven't stolen too much, a few office pencils and paper clips, but hey, big deal. I'm not an evil man. I do not need somebody out there in the universe saying, oh, I forgive you. I don't need forgiveness. All right? I want to talk to you. Have you heard of the anthropic coincidence? Anthropic. Let's put it on the screen. Anthropic. It's from the Greek word anthropos. It means man. The anthropic coincidences. It's a rather recent discovery that has ascertained that our universe is so critically and finely balanced that for a split millimeter, can I use that? If there's deviation to a degree, men and women would not exist on this terrestrial firma, on this ball, terra firma. Let me quote a physicist named Paul Davies. Here's what he's talking about. Had the Big Bang been weaker, talking about the law of gravity, if it had been stronger or weaker, had the Big Bang, it's on the screen, been weaker, the cosmos would have soon fallen back on itself in a big crunch. On the other hand, had it grown stronger, the cosmic material would have dispersed so rapidly that the galaxies wouldn't have formed. Either way, the structure of the universe seems to depend very sensitively on the precise matching of explosive vigor to gravitating power. How precisely is it matched, Dr. Davies? Let me put the number on the screen. Take a look at this. 1 to the 10th to the 60th power. I want to remind you that the 60 means 60 zeros after, okay? Now, what is that? Get my mind around it, Dr. Davies, please. He says, all right, I'll give you an illustration. I'm quoting him again. To give meaning to these numbers, he writes, suppose you want to fire a bullet, all right, at a 1-inch target on the other side of the observable universe, 20 billion light years away. Your aim would have to be accurate to that same part in 10 to the 60th. You have to be able to hit 20 billion light years away and 1-inch target, or the universe is dead. Ladies and gentlemen, the physical components of this cosmos in which you and I reside are that finely tuned. Here's where I'm going. Could it be then that the moral universe is just as finely tuned? Huh? Oh, I know you're not Al Capone. Al Capone was a pretty bad guy. You've heard of that gangster, haven't you? I know that Al Capone wasn't as bad as Adolf Hitler. I realize that. And I'm not as bad as Al Capone. But does that make me a saint? Or could it be that this moral universe is so finely tuned that one standard deviation to the right or the left, you know those little paper clips, you know that lie I told, you know that little bit of indiscretion, you know the thoughts that I have been harboring, dripping with that acid, do you know that that little deviation will bring the same eventual catastrophic results within the human psyche? Could it be? I mean, if the universe is so finely balanced physically, what about morally? And if that's the case, you and I, oh mercy, you and I stand before a moral standard so high that it just wipes me out. What should we do? Good news. It's the good news of forgiveness. God's forgiveness to the likes of you and me. Apparently, this one whose attribute we reflect is willing to take the worst thing I have ever done and just like that, wipe the record clean. Apparently, there is a way for me to be released from that dripping acid deep inside. God, the God I speak of, is a forgiving God. And because He is, whatever you have done, the tweaking of your conscience even, He says, I'll take care of it. I will forgive you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's phenomenal. I can't turn to the primordial ooze to get forgiveness. But apparently there is somewhere I can turn and be released. All that acid bled from my system, so that with joy and with peace and with new reason to live, I can experience forgiveness in my personal life. Whoa, that seems to me to be an incredible, incredible gift. But, I say this with my last breath, but there is only one other human experience that I know of that is quite like it. For you see, the joy of being forgiven is only matched by the joy of forgiving. And it may be that right now there is somebody in your life that needs to be forgiven. They may never come to you, sir, and ask you, or say, I'm sorry, and ask for your forgiveness. You hold it in your hands to set them free and set yourself free just by saying, okay, I'm willing. I will forgive you. I release the anger. I release you. Ladies and gentlemen, this universe wired, is it, by one who has given the gift? I can't think of a more critical reason, therefore, to ask for that gift, the gift of forgiveness.
So we hope we've given you some food for thought. In fact, we're certain that we have. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us, or you can visit our website, or you can give us a call. We've given you all the options, so we'd love to hear from you.
As Alexander Pope said, to err is human, to forgive, divine. Could it be that our ability to give forgiveness and our need to receive forgiveness are evidence themselves of a God who offers us both? Think about it, and join us again next time for more of The Evidence.
Bye for now.